the fall of Damascus and the state of Israel. The fall of Damascus and the state of Israel. Our keynote scriptures are Isaiah chapter 17, verses 1 through 3, which read as thus: the burden of the cup of cursing to give Damascus to drink. Behold, Damascus is removed so as to be no more a kingdom, and it shall be as a city laid waste. Their cities are deserted, they are laid waste. They shall be for dwelling places for flocks of sheep. They shall lie down, and none shall make them to move away. The kingdom shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of the solitary ones from Syria, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yahweh Sabaoth. Isaiah 1, chapter 17, verses 1 through 3, the Targum, Jonathan ben Uziel text, the ancient scribe. Isaiah 17, verses 1 through 3, that we just read from the Targum text, is the ancient text of chapter 17 of Isaiah. It is an ancient Israelite text that was a translation from ancient Hebrew into Aramaic about 100 years before Yeshua HaMashiach came. And it gives us a clear insight of the passages that we read from the Masoretic text and in the KJV versions. All right. The ancient Israelite Aramaic Targum text of chapter 17 of Isaiah sheds light through the prophetic lens of prophecy regarding the current Middle East war. Namely, that a major war is going to result in the destruction of Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. And this war will also result, as we shall see as we further read, that this war will also result in the fall of the government of the Zionist state of Israel also. Beginning with Damascus, because Damascus is the oldest continuous existing city in the world and has never been destroyed out of existence down through history. This means that chapter 17 of Isaiah is a prophecy that Isaiah is saying will result in the future times of these last days. Currently, because of Syria-Damascus alliance with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Shia Muslim armies of Iran and Iraq, Hamas and the other allies it has, Damascus is constantly under attack and bombardment from the Israeli Defense Force. Also, because of the current war in Gaza and the Zionist government of Israel, there are rumors of war that Syria and its allies are about to attack Israel in defense of Gaza. Yet, according to Isaiah 17, this coming war will result in both the total destruction of the Syrian capital of Damascus, and as we shall see, that this war will also result in the fall of the Zionist government of Israel as well. As stated in Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1 through 3, again, the burden of the cup of cursing to give Damascus to drink. Behold, Damascus is removed so as to be no more a kingdom, and it shall be as a city laid waste. Their cities are deserted. They are laid waste. They shall be for dwelling places for flocks of sheep. They shall lie down, and none shall make them to move away. The government shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of the solitary ones from Syria, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yahweh Sabaoth. Notice as in verse 1 of Isaiah 17, it describes the future destruction of Damascus, which will result in it never being a city again, because it states, behold, Damascus is removed, so as to be no more a kingdom. It shall be as a city laid waste. Also, in verse 2 of Isaiah 17, it describes the destruction of other Syrian cities that will likewise be destroyed at the time of the destruction of the Syrian capital of Damascus, which states, their cities are deserted, they are laid waste, they shall be for dwelling places for flocks of sheep. They shall lie down, and none shall make them to move away. But in verse 3, it describes that at the same time of the destruction of Damascus and other Syrian cities, that the Israeli government will also fall. As stated in verse 3 of Isaiah 17, the government shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of the solitary ones from Syria, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yahweh of hosts. In verse 3 of the Targum text, notice that it says in the times of the future destruction of Damascus, that it also says, quote, the government shall cease from Ephraim. This government of Ephraim mentioned in verse 3 is a government that will fall at the same time of the destruction of Damascus, Syria in the future. In today's conflict in the Middle East, the inevitable question that arises is who or what is the government of Ephraim today that will fall at the time of the destruction of the Damascus, Syria? The inevitable answer is that the government of Ephraim, referred to in Isaiah 17, verse 3 in the ancient Aramaic Targum text, is actually referring to the government of the Zionist state of Israel, which will fall in their war with Syria when the Syrian capital, Damascus, falls. So also the retaliation will cause the government of this current Jewish state of Israel to fall as well. Sort of like mutually assured destruction. The question arises is, how can the current Zionist government of the state of Israel be called the government of Israel, of Ephraim? How can this be? Historically, the term Ephraim not only referred to the actual Israelite tribe of Ephraim, but also meant the other 10 northern tribes of Israel that comprised the northern kingdom of Israel. Similar as how the southern kingdom of Judah comprised other Israelite tribes other than the tribe of Judah, such as Levi and Benjamin. The designation of the 10 northern Israelite tribes being called Ephraim and the southern tribes being called Judah is shown in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 15 through 16, which states, the word of Yah came again unto me, saying, moreover, thou son of man, take for thee one stick and write upon it for Judah and for the children of Israel, his companion. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. So in reference to the northern tribes collectively being called Ephraim, we must take into account as we discern the latter day meaning in Isaiah 17, verse 3, which states, the government of Ephraim shall fall, and how this is a reference to the current state of Israel. According to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6, the northern kingdom of Ephraim was exiled by the Assyrians into areas of northern Mesopotamia and the Central Asian and Caucasus Mountain regions. As stated in 2 Kings 17:6, when the Ephraim capital of Samaria in northern Israel was taken by the Assyrians around 720 BC. Quote, 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Hala and Habar by the river of Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. The presence of Black Ephraimites in the Assyrian exile living among Caucasian people in Central Asia is well documented, as was documented by a dear friend and brother on YouTube named Dante Fortson in his YouTube documentary entitled Black Khazars. In his documentary, Black Khazars, our brother Dante Fortson cites a historical source from Malabar Jews of India who report that they saw and knew of Black Israelites who were scattered among Khazar Jewish converts during medieval times. These Hebrews of Ephraim mixed with the Khazar converts of Central Asia. This is also genetically verified by researchers who reported in the paper, which is entitled E1B1A, Genetic Mixture Among Jewish People. This is a paper written by two great world-class geneticists, Marjani of the University of California, Berkeley, and Dr. Wright of Harvard University. It says, quote, in 2011, Marjani detected 3% to 5% sub-Saharan African ancestry in all 8 of the diverse Jewish populations, which would include Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Syrian Jews, Iranian Jews, Iraqi Jews, Greek Jews, Turkish Jews, Italian Jews that they analyzed. The timing of this African admixture among all Jewish populations was identical. The exact date was not determined, but it was estimated to have taken place between 1,600 and 3,400 years ago. Although African admixture was determined among South Europeans and Near Eastern populations too, the admixture was found to be younger in those places compared to the Jewish populations. This findings, the author explained as evidence regarding common origin of these 8 main Jewish groups. It is interesting that the Mizrahi, Iranian, and Iraqi Jews, who are thought to be extended at least in part from Jews who were exiled to Babylon about 2,600 years ago, share the signal of African admixture. A parsimonious explanation of these observations is that they reflect a history in which many of the Jewish groups descend from a common ancestral population, which was itself admixed with Africans prior to the beginning of the Jewish diaspora that occurred in the 8th to 6th centuries BC, the authors concluded. Yes, that's what they were talking about in this paper. about E1B1A, which is what they call sub-Saharan African DNA, but actually it did not originate in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is the leading DNA that African Americans are primarily comprised of. So that in all 8 groups of Jewish people, there's about 3 to 5% of them who actually have the same blood you have. This is what Dr. Reich at Harvard, who has a paper, another world-class geneticist, Dr. Reich at Harvard, has a paper about this so-called sub-Saharan ancestry being the same DNA of the Luya tribe in Kenya and the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria, which is the leading DNA that so-called African Americans have, which is E1B1A. This is the paper by the geneticist Marjani and Dr. Reich of Harvard, as well as other geneticists in this paper that's entitled The History of African Gene Flow into Southern European Levantines and Jews. And so in this section, they speak about the so-called African admixture, which is really not originally from Africa. E1B1A actually is a lineage that came out of the Middle East. And the evidence of that shows that the oldest remains of E1B1A skeletons are not found in Africa. They're found in the Middle East. The DNA of the women of the ancient Israelites at Tel Alula in Syria showed that there were 4 mothers for this people who were, and these 4 mothers were classified as L2, L3, which is the DNA of our beautiful Hebrew princesses and queens of this diaspora in America. And they discuss in this section about the so-called African admixture among the 8 groups of Jewish people as a reference, which is a reference to E1B1A of tribes that are scattered remnants of Israel that ended up in Africa. Notice that these genetic researchers in 2011 cited that 3 to 5% of the Jewish people carry the ancient DNA of E1B1A that the Yoruba and Luya Hebrews in Africa carry, which is also the dominant E1B1A gene of this Israelite captivity in America. The Yoruba are an ancient Israelite people scattered to West Africa, primarily in Nigeria. Among the Yoruba, who are primarily Israelites of Judah, there is also a well-documented clan among them of Ephraimites, who are called the B'nai Ephraim, meaning sons of Ephraim, whom they say they descend from. The genetic research has found that 3 to 5% of Jewish people have ancient Hebrew DNA of the B'nai Ephraim of the Yoruba, dated from around 700 BC, which was the time of the exile of Ephraim by the Assyrians, as noted in 2 Kings 17, verse 6. According to the prophet Hosea, Ephraim would mix himself among the Gentiles during the Assyrian exile, as stated in Hosea chapter 7, verse 8 through 11. Quote, Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake, not turned. Strangers have devoured his strength, and he knoweth it not. Yea, gray hairs are here, and there upon him, yet he knoweth not. And the pride of Israel testifieth to his faith. And they do not return to Yah their Elohim, nor seek him for all this. Ephraim also is like a silly dove without a heart. They call to Egypt, but they go to Assyria. Also, the prophecy of Jacob over Ephraim in Genesis chapter 48, verse 13 through 19 states, and Joseph brought them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, Elohim, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the Elohim which fed me all my life unto this day, the angel have redeemed me from an evil. Bless the lads, and let my name be upon them, and the name of thy fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim. It displeased him. And he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it, but he also shall become a people. But he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Notice in verse 19, our father Israel said that Ephraim's seed would become a multitude of nations. This means that many Gentile nations, whether by intermarriage with Ephraim's children or by conversion to their way of life, would become a part of Ephraim. This is why the geneticist research showed that 3 to 5% of Jewish people are Israelites based on them having the same ancient Hebrew DNA of E1B1A that you have. And based on the dates of their admixture with ancient Israelite DNA, this corresponds to the time of Ephraim's exile among the Gentiles by the Assyrians around 720 BC. Based on all this scientific and historical biblical evidence, this means that 3 to 5% of modern Israelis are descendants of ancient bloodline Israelites. This evidence likewise shows that 95 to 97% of Israelis are not ethnic bloodline Israelites, but are Gentile nations that are converts who have clustered primarily around the descendants of Ephraim, of whom Jacob said, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Therefore, the Zionist state of Israel is called the government of Ephraim in Isaiah 17:3, which will fall in the time of the war in the Middle East between the states of Israel, the state of Israel, and Syria and its Iranian-backed allies, of which war will bring about the destruction of Damascus, but it will likewise result in the fall of the government of Ephraim, described in verse 3, which is the fall of the Zionist government of Israel, as declared in Isaiah 28, verses 1 through 4. Woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, Yah hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim, shall be trodden underfoot, and the glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower, as the hasty flower before the summer, which when he looketh upon it, seeth while it is yet in his hand, he eateth it up. Also, at this current moment, the war in Gaza seems to be not only a judgment on the other nations involved in the war, but it's a judgment as well on the pride of the rulers of the state of Israel. They proudly boast of their power to destroy, but they have no power but what was given to them. And they do not recognize Yah Elohim in his only begotten son, Yeshua. They take joy in the pride of their own inventions and military alliances with America rather than the truth about Yah. This is why Yah said he will judge their pride. At this current time, the war in Gaza seems to be moving closer to the prophetic fulfillment of Isaiah 17. While the Israelis have the upper hand militarily, being supported by American military, they could totally destroy Damascus easily right now. But Isaiah likewise says in verse 3 of chapter 17 that Damascus will be destroyed in one way that will be similar as the fall of the glory of the state of Israel. When it states, quote, verse 3 of chapter 17 again of Isaiah, the government shall cease from Ephraim and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of the solitary ones from Syria, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yahweh of hosts. Notice that the destruction of Damascus is described as being similar to that of the fallen glory of the state of Israel that happens at the same time, where it says, and their glory shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith Yahweh of hosts. This indicates that though Damascus will be destroyed ultimately in a war with Israel, that this war will also result in the destruction of the glory of the state of Israel also. As stated in verses 4 through 3, and in that day, 4 through 11 of Isaiah 17, and in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. And it shall be as when the harvestman gather the corn and reapeth the ears with his arm. And it shall be as he that gathers ears in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it, as the shaking of the olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the utmost bow, 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches thereof, saith Yah Elohim of Israel. In that day shall a man look to his maker, and his eyes shall have respect to the Holy One of Israel. And he shall not look to the altars, the work of his hands, neither shall respect that which his fingers have made, under the groves or the images. In that day shall his strong cities be as a forsaken bow, and an uppermost branch, which they left because of the children of Israel, and there shall be desolation. Because thou hast forgotten the Elohim of thy salvation, and hast not been mindful of the rock of thy strength. Therefore shalt thou plant pleasant plants, and shalt set it with strange slips. In the morning shalt thou make thy plant to grow, and in the day thou shalt make thy plant to grow, and in the morning shalt thou make thy seed to flourish. But the harvest shall be as a heap in the day of grief and of desperate sorrow. Notice in verse 4 that it says that the glory of the state of Israel will be greatly diminished as a casualty of war with Syria and its Iranian-backed allies. Because it says in verse 4, in that day it shall come to pass that the glory of Jacob shall be made thin, and the fatness of his flesh shall wax lean. In verses 5 through 6, Isaiah describes how much of the Israeli population will be wiped out by this war. When it says, and it shall be, verse 5 through 6, the harvestman gathereth the corn and reapeth the ears with his arms. And it shall be as he that gathereth ears in the valley of Rephaim. Yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it, as the shaking of an olive tree. 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bow, 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches thereof, saith Yah Elohim of Israel. Notice in verse 6 it describes how only 3 or 5% of the Israeli population will survive the war that will not only bring destruction to Damascus, but will also bring destruction to the state of Israel as well. Because it says, yet gleaning grapes shall be left in it as the shaking of an olive tree, 2 or 3 berries in the top of the uppermost bowl, 4 or 5 in the outmost fruitful branches thereof, saith Yah Elohim of Israel. Now, this is really this is a fascinating coincidence that only 3 to 5% of Israelis are actual Israelites by ancestral bloodline. And that these survivors of the war with Damascus, that they are described as being like 3 to 5% gleanings of the harvest produce of Yah's judgment on the state of Israel. So that's an interesting parallel with verse 5 with what the geneticists have all uncovered, 3 to 5% remaining. So it would not be accurate to say that all of the state of Israel is fake. We got some of our own people in Dimona. They're lost. They're not in Yeshua. But that's a segment of this 3 to 5% of those in the state of Israel. And then there's others from other parts of the world. You can look at them and tell that they do look a whole lot more like you, like people from Yemen, Ethiopia, and so forth. In verses 7 through 8, the survivors of the state of Israel war will look to Yah for deliverance rather than the work of their own hands in their warfare technology or even their Kabbalistic, occult, mystical occultism, idolatry. So you can tell then that this is referring to the modern state of Israel. If you're talking about a future time when Damascus is destroyed, there's got to be a modern state of Israel, which is called the government of Ephraim, in existence also. And the state of Israel fits that description. In verse 9, it describes how the Israeli war with Damascus will result in the destruction of Israeli cities, where it says in verse 9, in that day shall his strong cities be as a forsaken bow, and uppermost branch which they left because of the children of Israel, and there shall be desolation. You always hear the enemies of the state of Israel, like Iran, and say, if you attack us, the first place going to go is Tel Aviv. That's the largest city. Tel Aviv is going down. That's the homosexual capital, not only of the Middle East, but of the world. It's worse than San Francisco. It's going to go down. We also know that they have gay pride parades there and in Jerusalem. I remember like 30 years ago when I first started visiting Israel back in the early 90s, you would never have anything like that in Jerusalem. Be too many people upset and angry over it. But now they have gay pride parades there too. They have Halloween. They're going to be doing Halloween in the next couple of weeks. That's a big holiday in Israel. So they've and believe it or not, they do Christmas. They do it from the commercial aspect of it with Santa Claus and reindeers. They like that part, you know. So yeah, so they do a lot of these things that are obnoxious in the sight of the Most High. All right, and for this reason, they can't expect that Yah's protection will stand with them as they expect he will. And they don't realize, they always talk about they have the Samson option, where if they're attacked by overwhelming numbers of Arabs, they will pull out nuclear weapons. And though the Arabs could destroy them, they will destroy the Arabs. It's the Samson option. But see, they don't understand about Samson. The Samson story is really about a man that found his way back to Yah after getting lost. They're not talking about getting found from being lost. or turning to Yeshua, because they tried to pass laws just a few months ago. If you testify of Yeshua to somebody, they make a complaint on you, they can put you in jail. Now that government there wants to do that. And don't think they won't keep trying. But this is one of the reasons why, just like Samson, when he lost his strength, he assumed he still had strength to defeat the Palestinians. And he didn't realize when that hair was cut, he had no more strength. He broke the vow between him and Yah, the covenant. And so they've not only broke it, they've stepped on it and done all kind of manner of evil. And most of them, 95, 97% of them, are converts. So they become like Cinderella's stepsister. In the story of Cinderella, where they see she's the actual bloodline descendant of her father. They're the stepchildren of her father. But they're getting all of the benefits of her father. But see, the thing about Cinderella was, what got her out of that predicament was that she was the bride of the prince. She was the bride. And see, you, Israel here, that are in Yeshua, you are the bride of the prince, our King Mashiach, Messiah. And they're not, unless they repent and confess him, as we should also do. As Yeshua said of them, therefore, the Israeli society that the Zionists planted as the state of Israel is described as a strange plant that shall be uprooted. As Yeshua said in Matthew 15:13 regarding the Zionist Israeli state that grew out of the teachings of Judaism, that was based around the teachings of the Pharisees who rejected him. In Matthew 15:12-14, it says, then his disciples and said unto him, knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended after they heard these things? And he answered and said, every plant which my heavenly Father have not planted shall be rooted up. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. Isaiah, as Yeshua explained, said that the government of the Israelis will be uprooted because it was a strange plant that the Father did not plant. According to Isaiah, starting at chapter 17, verse 12 through Isaiah 18:7, the prophet speaks of the time when Yahweh will plant you as his true nation of Israel in the land following the fall of the state of Israel and the destruction of Damascus.